I believe that I'm one of the few candidates in this race who knows Chattanooga from both sides of the tracks, from every zip code. I grew up in Alton Park and East Chattanooga. I lived on Highland Avenue, just a few doors down from Union Grove Baptist Church. I lived in City View Apartments in East Chattanooga, up the hill from Memorial Hospital. And I lived in Eastdale, in Rollingwood, off of Wilcox Boulevard on Wandale Trail. But I'm also the guy who is Baylor School's first African-American graduate. And from Baylor, I went to Harvard, and I have a degree in economics from Harvard. After college, I spent several years working in Coca-Cola bottling, and I've worked for big corporations like Coca-Cola, Marriott, Unum, back when it was Provident, and Morgan Stanley. But for the last decade or so, I've been really involved in Chattanooga's startup community. I've been a mentor at the company lab, and I am a board member and shareholder in Rapid RMS, which is one of the companies that I mentored there, and that continues to thrive and do well today. So I think I have a varied business background, but I've always said that the real reason that I work is to support my volunteer habit. And so going back to the early 1990s, I was the board chair of Chattanooga Venture. Many people will remember Venture. It was a community goal setting and citizen engagement organization. We helped establish neighborhood associations all across Chattanooga, including a neighborhood association at the Harriet Tubman housing development. And I remember fondly working with Ann Wadley there to really create a neighborhood environment and to empower the residents of public housing to take control of their neighborhood and the quality of life there. This is a pivotal time in Chattanooga's history. We have had a wild year between the tornado, COVID-19, and just the pressures that everyone has been under. We need a different kind of mayor. Because the number one problem that has been exposed during this period are the vast income and wealth disparities that exist in our community. If you go all the way back to 1997, you will find that the average African-American household earned about 62% of what the average white household earned. And now you move forward to 2021, and you would think after all of this progress, after Chattanooga's being named the best outdoor city ever, the best mid-sized city, the most livable city, the best place to start a business, you would think that we would have erased that disparity. But no, here we sit in 2021 and pre-COVID, so I'm sure it's much worse now, the figure has dropped to 50%. The average African-American household today in Chattanooga earns half what the average white household earns. So I don't know why we would elect the same kind of mayor in this election. I don't know why we go back to central casting and we elect a downtown developer, or we elect the rich white guy, or we elect the protege of the current mayor. I don't know why we would do that, because those things have not worked for us in the past. And it is time for the average everyday citizen to stand up and take back their power, because they have tremendous power, and it's time that we all stood together and we demanded something different. So that is why I want to be the next mayor of Chattanooga, because I can bring that difference. I am the different candidate. And as I said, I know Chattanooga from every zip code, and I think that's what we need.
In the past, I worked as a professional counselor. I was on the crisis response team, handling homicide, suicide, child abuse. So my feet have touched the flames, if you know what I mean. I'm definitely not afraid of conflict, frustration, and pressure. So, and I'm good with people. I don't have any past political background. But in a way, that's, I think, is a good thing, because I'm not constrained by being obligated to any groups. I'm my own man. I can think outside the box and be more creative as far as the government is concerned.
I'm not sure that anything can really qualify a person to, run for a civic office. I know there's basic qualifications like being a certain age for like mayor, and, there's not any other qualifications, pertaining to education or anything like that. But I think one has to be civically minded, want to be doing what's right for everybody, and also doing the due process of the position, knowing what the mayor can and cannot do as well, knowing the city charter and so forth. And so, those things I think is what can qualify a person to run for office. And I think we need more people to actually run for these offices. I mean, you see the mayor's race, we've got a lot of people running this time, but in the past, we've always had races where there's little to no involvement. So I think that's a really good, thing to focus on right there as well.
I'm a native of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm a graduate from Howard High. I'm attended Southern New Hampshire University, graduated with a PhD. And over the course of my time, I've been just serving the people. And what drew me to running is, before I got into the race, no one was speaking the issues of the people. Everybody was no one speaking of public. When I'm speaking of affordable housing, true affordable housing, when I'm speaking of early childhood development, they wasn't speaking of public safety before I joined. So that's why I joined the race. But now everyone's speaking about it. I guess they did their research, and I'm glad to know everyone's on the board. So yes, that's why I joined for the people. So I'm running for the people.
So listen, there are a lot of qualified folks and great folks running for mayor, and my qualifications are, I've been a city attorney for 5 years under Mayor Burke. I have that public sector experience. My first role in government was actually in the county mayor, Claude Ramsey. So again, having that public sector experience. I've also served in senior leadership roles at two of the largest employers in our community. So I also bring that private sector experience, having run a small business and been a part of small businesses. So again, I bring a unique perspective to this, but I think what's more important here is why I'm running, right? And I'm a native of Chattanooga, born and raised in a community called the West Side. There I learned the importance of service. There I learned what community looks and feels like, the sense of belonging. But there I also understood when I left that particular neighborhood that the city as a whole didn't necessarily bring that same sense of belonging for me or make that same sense of belonging for me. So I'm running in many ways to make sure that we're doing the work for those communities that have not been connected, for those voices that have not been at the table. I've been championing this for many of the 20 years that I've been back here in Chattanooga, working on different projects ranging from restoring the rights of felons who lost their right to vote, or getting more folks appointed to boards for nonprofits that want to have more inclusion and more diversity. And so for me, this is a continuation of that work. And that's why, for me, our priorities are pretty clear. One, we are experiencing one of the most significant events or issues that we face ever, right? And this pandemic, we've got to get through this. So my first priority, Sarah, is to make sure we recover, not just through just surviving this pandemic. We want to thrive on the other side. We want to look at things differently and rebuild differently. Second priority is, we do that right, we're setting ourselves up for a more inclusive economy. And what I mean by that is getting back to my personal journey, understanding that we have a lot of Chattanoogans that have been left out and left behind. We've seen a lot of growth here, a lot of prosperity. We need to make sure there's more shared prosperity. That means good paying jobs, investing more in people. That also means investing in neighborhoods. We see downtown is certainly doing well, but more of our neighborhoods need a focus. So you'll see us talk about this more, and that includes access to quality housing and affordable housing. Certainly want to make sure we don't leave, we got to focus on our kids as well, whether that's through early childhood in the Office of Early Learning, which I was at the city when that was started, or our partnerships with Hamilton County Schools and the work we can do in partnership with them. And then lastly, I think we've got to reimagine public safety, right? I mean, we can talk about this in just a bit here, but those are the priorities that we want to lift up. But primarily it is to make sure that more Chattanoogans feel like this is the best town ever for them as well.
I grew up here in Chattanooga, raised my family here, raised my kids here, except for 4 years in New York in school. I've spent my whole life here, certainly the last 32 years of my professional life. Most folks know me as a small business person. I've owned and operated and started quite a few small businesses here, but I've also spent 30 years in the nonprofit world. So everything from, been on a lot of boards, done a ton of community volunteer work, everything from Big Brothers Big Sisters to the Community Foundation, where I was the chairman recently, and a lot in between. And look, I've had a front row seat for a lot of the problems that face Chattanooga. I've dealt with a ton of crises, and I've run large organizations and large budgets. And I think that makes me really uniquely qualified among the other candidates in the race to lead Chattanooga out of this COVID crisis and into the future.
I done my postdoctorate out in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I've been a businessman. I lived here in Chattanooga my whole life. Been a businessman for 30 years. I've been in the development sector, and I do a lot of consulting for Colorado Springs, Colorado, and other municipalities across the nation. And my expertise is dealing with legislation that comes from like Washington, D.C., things that come down. Building codes is basically the hub of what I have been doing for these municipalities. But the main thrust, what I'm trying to do is what's gotten so popular for me is we got to get back to trade schools.
I have a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. I have a master's degree in education. I'm a former Spanish educator. I did a master's thesis in Hispanic immigrant acculturation. I have a good working knowledge of the United States Constitution and my own personal copy of it. So I understand the civil rights and understand things. I also, having lived in poverty for the last 10 years, I understand the struggles that people are going through. I come from a working class family. My father was a crane operator. Okay. So from my academic background, and I've also run for office twice. I've run for Congress in 2016 and county mayor back in 2018. This is my third time on the ballot. So I have a good working knowledge of government and what it takes to get things done. Also, I fully understand the hurt and struggle going on in many people's lives today. I make $10.50 an hour right now. I have a disability. And during the pandemic, I can see it firsthand because working at the hospital, even in the cafeteria, one, I understand the precautions and I also understand the economic impact of the virus. For example, if visitation being cut down at the hospital, that affects hours they can schedule us and thus our pay. So there are many, many people in the city and everywhere that are affected by the pandemic. So I believe that we need strong labor protection to protect our pay and our housing and our food security. So given my academic background and my real life experience, I believe I have the knowledge and the firsthand experience to become the next mayor because I can really understand the insecurity of housing, insecurity of food, the insecurity of jobs, and even what it's like to have COVID ravage your entire family, and trying to get access to vaccinations, trying to get access to shots and testing and so on and so forth. So a lot of the pain and struggles that many people are facing, I face every day. As a working American and as a frontline worker, I understand.
My background was I was a Marine and I deployed to Iraq, trained the Iraqi army. I also went to Liberia during their civil war in 2003 on a humanitarian mission. Since getting out of the military, I worked for the State Department protecting diplomats in Iraq, planning their routes. We'd have primary, secondary, tertiary routes in Baghdad, Iraq in 2006 when we were getting attacked on average 60 times a day. So I was able to navigate the human terrain and working with the federal government. And I believe that I'm the only candidate that actually worked for the federal government, which will give me an advantage when dealing with programs like HUD. Since then, I've become a private investigator, and I've done investigations in over 70 countries. Sometimes we're dealing with anti-human trafficking. We're dealing with helping to rebuild the Bahamas, for instance, after a hurricane, or help Puerto Rico after earthquakes. And I want to do nation building at home. And we've been doing that here in Chattanooga. We've been doing gang intervention. I've been getting guys jobs. We've been bringing gang members together with the police and discussing the Bible and how we're going to move forward and stop the crime. And I want to end the war on the poor and wage a war on poverty, because a lot of our problems stem from poor educational system at the county. And, we can't just skirt our duty here in the city and say, well, that's the county's problem. We have to focus on early childhood education. So the reason why I think I'm qualified is because I'm a bridge builder. I'm an avid reader, and I believe in the principle that we must seek to understand before we are understood. And I am out there every day talking to people, walking around the projects at night, and we must be the same person when we go up to Lookout Mountain. We've got to be the same person that when we're walking around our most vulnerable communities. And I'm not one of these candidates going up to Lookout Mountain begging for money. I'm doing this out of my own pocket mostly, and then some small donations from the people, $5,000 budget. We're going to take our city back. We're going to get people livable wages. We've already put a lot of people to work. I'm telling people that, if you want to join a gang or you're, committing crimes, stop doing this. And I'm going to get you a job in the construction field. And we've been able to do that.
I've been involved in public service all my life. And I'm currently the city councilman for District 7, which is an extremely diverse area in our city, which captures those things that are economically growing in our city, but we also have some parts of the city that need some help. My background in working in nonprofits, for-profits, and education gives me a broad range of how to develop organizations and manage different types of budget. I'm just extremely excited to have this opportunity to be running. And I believe my passion, my experiences, and my skills could be a real asset to bringing together a really diverse group of people that reflects our city that will take us into the future.
I have a very unique perspective and background that's prepared me for this role. In fact, I've said I think it's a role that Chattanooga has prepared me for my entire life. I have worked for a Fortune 500 company, building teams and creating market share throughout the Southeast. I came back to Chattanooga. I ran a very large development, construction, and real estate company that I've met payroll and been on the public sector side, working with River City Company for the past 11 years. I've had a unique perspective in that we're an economic development organization, and I was involved in bringing $1.2 billion of investment to downtown. So I've had a track record of actually recruiting investment to the city and have worked alongside city government for the past 11 years. The way that River City has worked is that we work with partners from the public sector, the private sector, the foundations. And I think that's what we need to do as our city to move it forward, is how do we all bring all parties together, pulling the same way to move our city forward. And I have that experience. The number one priority would be, especially coming out of COVID, is how do we jumpstart the economy? There are a lot of small businesses just barely hanging on, and we need to make sure that we're giving them the resources they need, that we're setting up our city for success, and that we are a city that actually is out there recruiting business and talent, and making sure that we create an environment so our existing industry can grow.
I would advise people to go to robertcwilsonformayor.com. All of my information is there, my initiatives, my backgrounds, and I've written it all down. So please go there and check it out. I guess I would want to say, I've got some prepared stuff, but it wouldn't necessarily go right to my background, but just would want to say that enough with the labels. I think that's part of what I want to bring about in my campaign. It seems like that we're constantly in this time and age talking about Republicans, black, white, Democrats, liberals. But enough of that. I think the mayor's job is to be a unifier. It's a nonpartisan position for a reason. And even the other candidates, I keep hearing this narrative being pushed that there's two Chattanoogas. And I say that's a dangerous narrative. Enough with that too. We say, hey, there's the haves and the have-nots, more labels. But I would say it's the workers and the worker-nots. So using the term millennial, which is an age group, they don't necessarily have the same work ethics that some of us do. And that was to work hard and accumulate wealth. So I want to get that a message across to people that I'm the guy who brought himself up from the bootstraps. I was young, grew up in East Chattanooga, and I've been fortunate in my life, but I did it through hard work. So I want to be a unifying leader.
I love my city, and we are dealing with some difficult times. We are dealing with some challenging times in our city that requires a person with a lot of experience in not only the community, but also in economic development in order to get through this pandemic. I'm a medical professional for 31 years. I understand the pandemic and what we're going through with that. I also understand how to sustain a business during hardship and hard times. And so this is going to be a very crucial time for the voters that are out there thinking about who do I choose to vote for. So I want every voter to look at every candidate and look at what they also bring to the table in areas of experience with community. I've been a community activist, you all know. I've served as the NAACP president for 6 years, fighting for all of those who seem to be left behind and the voiceless. I fought for education. I fought for job opportunities. I fought for the homeless, the single moms that are struggling every day. I have been on the battlefield in this city. This is my hometown ever since I can remember. And so it is now that the people have called me because they trust me. They're tired of the same old thing. They're tired of I would say the line that people give them that they're going to do this. And when they get into the mayor's position, they turn. So the people know that I've always said what I'm going to do, and I've always done it. They can trust me. So I'm running because the people need someone that they can trust with experience, and that's me.